So, control decks. We've got a new one. Yeah, well, a new one that's kind of a support for the one that we previously had, being my Milotic, which currently isn't seeing a lot of play in Japan because people are starting to play switching cards and ways to play around it. But it's starting to pop back up along with a new control support Pokemon, that being Crustle. I did talk about this card in my setlist review video, and I said it was okay, but I am clearly wrong yet again. It has the Mystic Rock Shelter ability that says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. We do have similar cards like this in the format. For example, Mimikyu, with its Safeguard ability, says the exact same thing, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX, as well as Pokemon V, which will no longer be in the game as of rotation. It also has the Ghost Eye ability, which allows you to put 7 damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon. Don't know why it couldn't just do 70 damage, but okay. We also have Aegis Slash from Paradox Rift, that says again the exact same thing, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. And its attack, Hard Bashing, does 120 damage, and this attack's damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon for 1 metal and 1 colorless. And Crustle's attack says the exact same thing. Great Scissors does 120 damage, and damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon for a grass and 2 colorless. So why is this card seeing more play than the other two? Well, it's seeing play in a big mixture of decks. There are so many different decks on the list that are playing this card, but it's mostly seeing play as basically a replacement to Mimikyu inside of these control type decks. So previously, these control decks were playing stuff like Farigiraf. Farigiraf's Armatail says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by EX Pokemon, but it was only basic EX Pokemon. So now with Crustle, you basically just take out Farigiraf, add in Crustle, and you basically have a better replacement for it that does, again, a decent amount of damage. Thanks to stuff like Turbo Energize, you can very easily power it up. It's also seen play alongside the new Yanmega, which is another way to power it up, as it's a Bug Boost ability, so that you can use this ability when this Pokemon moves from the bench to the active spot. You can set your deck for 3 Grass Energy and attach them to this Pokemon. Now you may be thinking, well, how does that power up the Crustle? Well, its attack for 3 grass and a colorless, so you will need to attach an energy to it in order to use it, does 210 damage, and then you can move 3 energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. So you can attack with Yanmega, do a lot of damage, 210, and we do have quite a few Pokemon in the format that are weak to grass, Charizard EX being a very good example. We also have stuff like Zoroark, so you could do a lot of damage, maybe even Oko something, and then move 3 of those grass energies onto your Crustle, move it into the active, and then just sit on it. Yep, because we're in a format where there isn't really any other attackers that decks play other than EX Pokemon. Let's take a look at the list. Dragapult pretty much only attacks with Dragapult. You have stuff like Dusknoir, Crustle has 150 HP. It can still get hit by damage counters, so that is like something to keep an eye on. But other than that, it has no other ways to attack it, except with Badoo, but like, okay. Raging Bolt plays purely EX Pokemon, even if you attack with something like Teal Mask Ogre, doesn't matter. Gardevoir, that one can kind of play around it because you play Screamtail and Drifloon and all those kinds of Pokemon, so that one can kind of play around it. Archlodon only attacks with Archlodon. Some Archlodon lists have started playing Petulant because we currently have a lot of decks in the format that want to go second, so that kind of punishes those going second decks. Goldengo, there are a few Goldengo lists that have been playing Ethan's Typhlosion, or Ethan's Typhlosion that have been playing Goldengo, so you can just use Ethan's Typhlosion because Crustle is weak to fire types, so that kind of play around it. Charizard, it's just a free win because you can just one-hit KO Charizard with Yanmega. Crustle doesn't one-hit KO it because it only does 120, so you double that to 240, and Charizard doesn't attack with anything else, I believe. Terrabox is just all EX Pokemon. Cynthia's Garchomp. Spiritomb kind of gets around it, so that's a thing. Eevee Box, again, only plays EX Pokemon. Ethan's Typhlosion very easily can compete against it. And then Hops Zacian, maybe with something like Cramorant, you could play around it. But for the most part, like 90% of the decks on the tier list just can't out this card or just really struggle to get rid of it. Combine that with, other control Pokemon we have in the format. Milotic, with his ability, prevents all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon done to this Pokemon, so it's a good counter for stuff like Dragapult. We also have Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, which prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by Pokemon with abilities. So if you do have a Pokemon that's able to attack around it, if it does have an ability, they can't get through Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. Deckless have also been playing Monkey Dory, so you can just attach Darkness Energy to it, and if your opponent has been putting damage counters around the board with stuff, then you can just move that damage onto, your opponent's Pokemon. Some Feraligatr lists have been playing it, which I think is a little bit interesting because Feraligatr by itself is already pretty strong, although it has kind of fallen off recently, so this might be able to help boost it back up. Plus, the pre-evolution of this Pokemon Dwebble is also very, very interesting. Its Ascension attack doesn't do any damage, but you can search your deck for a card that evolves from this Pokemon and put it straight onto it. So if you end up going second, you can have a Dwebble in the active, use this attack, evolve it into a Crustle, and now your opponent is going to have to already play around it, which is very, very powerful because you can just buddy poffin into this, attach an energy, and now it just becomes a Crustle. So you already have your main Pokemon established on your first turn if you decide to go second, which I imagine the deck probably does because of Dwebble being able to do that, which is pretty strong. But again, the deck has just been seen playing so many different lists. It's just been splashed into pretty much anything you could think of. It's been splashed into Milotic. It's its own pure deck where you literally just play Crustle. You don't play anything else. You play 4 Dwebble, 4 Crustle. Very similar to how Iron Hands was seen play, where you just play 4 Iron Hands. It's even seen play alongside Iron Hands. It's seen play alongside, just other control Pokemon like Mimikyu, Monkey Dory, Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, Milotic, even stuff like the Dunsparce EX, which does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in play for 1 colorless, which is pretty strong. It's been seen play with Cynthia's Garchomp. I guess it's just like a stall option. Seen play alongside Dreadnought, Impervious Shell Dreadnought, which says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon if that damage is 200 or more, which is a very easy number to hit. And then its Hard Crunch does 80 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon already has damage counters on it, it does 80 more, so 160 on a water for 3 colorless. It's okay, but again, if you do under 200, you can very easily 1-hit KO it. Again, Feraligatr it's seen play alongside of Ethan's Typhlosion, seen play with Blissey EX, which I guess is like okay because you can switch around the energy. So say you want to attack with Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon instead, you can switch the energies onto it and then start attacking. And then again, Yanmega is just a really strong grass Pokemon coming in the next set. Very powerful card. Can attach free energy to itself, does 210, and then you can move those energies onto Crustle, so then you can switch into it and just start stalling out the game. So in terms of the deck's representation, out of the new decks we have seen from this set, those being Ethan's Typhlosion, Cynthia, and Crustle, Crustle is seeing the highest amount of representation. Ethan's Typhlosion is currently at 2.2, Cynthia's Garchomp is at 3.4, and Crustle is at 4.3. It's still, the first week, the first few days of this new set, so these could obviously change, it could go down, it could go up. It's all in the air at the moment. But in terms of its, performance at City Leagues, the first few days, it didn't do very well. Like, I think the highest it got, let's have a look. The highest it got was 2 second place finishes and a 3rd place finish. And they got a 4th, a 5th, 6th, and 9th, and then a lot of just like lower place finishes. It recently got a 1st place finish, the Yanmega build. So it's only had 1 1st place finish, but it's seen a lot of play, which is why its representation is so high, because it's seen play in a lot of decks and it's just seen a lot of play at City Leagues in general, because people don't respect control decks sometimes, so they don't have a way to play around it, then they just could lose the game right there and then. As we saw at the Fukuoka Championship, people didn't respect Milotic and it sweeped all the way into Top Cut. Didn't win the event, but it did do really well. And if we enter a format where control decks start to become more prevalent, this deck could see a shoot up in popularity, but then people will start to adapt and it will slowly start to drop down. I imagine it will probably stay in the B tier for the time being. But again, as the weeks go on, new builds may come out, People might start experimenting with new stuff to play in the deck, and it could either climb up or it could fall down. We have yet to see, as the deck does have a hard counter against it, and there are some decks in the format that do play non-EX Pokemon as a form of attacker that can easily play around it. But for the time being, the deck is doing very, very well and might be the new control deck of the format, next to Milotic, because the deck does play Milotic. And that is it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What you think about Crustle? Do you think this deck and this card is just like being a bit overhyped maybe? Do you think people will start to grow more accustomed to Crustle and find ways to play around it? Do you think this deck will be the new control deck going into the post-rotation format? So on and so forth. Will you be picking up this deck or this card? Do you want to be one of those people that annoys your locals? Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, all of the nonsense, and I will see you in the next video, whatever that may be. Take care.